So the pineal gland is located at the back of the diencephalon, which is that kind of weird shaped tissue that has the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. It's kind of found at the posterior portion in the epithalamus. And the cells in the pineal gland are called pinealocytes. And our pinealocytes release the hormone melatonin. And melatonin production goes up as the sun starts going down. And what melatonin does is it helps promote sleepiness in diurnal animals. So melatonin comes on for everyone when the sun starts going down, both diurnal animals who are awake during the day and nocturnal animals. So it probably has different roles in nocturnal animals than it does for us. But for us it helps to promote sleepiness. Other things that it does is it helps to regulate the circadian rhythm. By resetting your 24-hour clock every day when the sun goes down, it helps to regulate your circadian rhythm. And then the other thing that it does is it inhibits growth hormone release inhibiting hormone, which is somatostatin. It inhibits somatostatin release so that at night we only have growth hormone releasing hormone on board, and growth can happen while children are sleeping. This is why it seems sometimes kids wake up and they're 2 inches taller than they were the night before. For the thyroid gland, we've talked a little bit about the thyroid gland already, but the thyroid gland is part of what's called the HPT axis, or the hypothalamo-pituitary thyroid axis. With the release of thyrotropin-releasing hormone, which is released from neurons in the hypothalamus into that primary plexus of the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. It will travel down and it will bind to TRH receptors on our thyrotropes. And our thyrotropes will release TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, in response. Thyroid stimulating hormone is going to target follicular cells in the thyroid and stimulate the release of our thyroid hormones. So what do our thyroid hormones do? These are metabolic hormones that increase basal metabolic rate. It's kind of hard to tell what thyroid hormones do until you've got a problem with thyroid hormone secretion. But people who are hypersecreting thyroid hormones tend to be very thin, and their eyes can get buggy, they can be anxious, and they can be heat intolerant. People who have low levels of thyroid hormones tend to be sluggish, have low energy, cold intolerant, and can put on weight. So some things that it does at specific targets, thyroid hormone at muscle would help to increase anabolism or protein buildup. Actually, at adipose tissue, thyroid hormone increases lipolysis. In general, it's going to have the overall effect of increasing metabolism in cells that are targets for thyroid hormone. As far as other hormones that come out of the thyroid, our parafollicular cells, or our C cells, are releasing the hormone calcitonin. And if you remember from last semester, I have a silly poem to tell you what calcitonin does. Calcitonin puts the bone in. So what does this mean? That calcitonin is released when we've got high levels of blood calcium. So the stimulus in the negative feedback loop would be high levels of blood calcium. The sensor are going to be the C cells. So we'll say our sensor are the C cells. They are also the control center because they will release calcitonin in response to the increase in blood calcium, and calcitonin will go and stimulate our effectors. The effectors are going to be bone, specifically osteoblasts, so we can increase osteoblast activity. So they will lay down osteoid into the bone and take up some of that excess calcium. Other effectors would be the small intestine, and the small intestine will inhibit calcium absorption. So we will effector would be the kidneys. And what will happen with calcitonin on board is the kidneys will excrete excess calcium in the urine. So this will stimulate calcium excretion. And once we've done all of these things, then we can drop these high calcium levels and shut down the negative feedback loop once we return to homeostatic levels. The parathyroid glands on the posterior aspect of the thyroid release the other hormone that's responsible in helping maintain blood calcium homeostasis, parathyroid hormone. So the stimulus for this negative feedback loop is a drop in blood calcium. And this is by far the more common situation. So very rarely do we have excess calcium levels, but we can have drops in calcium, and we really have to keep blood calcium levels in tight homeostatic range because calcium is so important for muscle contraction and nervous signaling. So when there's a drop in calcium, this is sensed by our principal cells in our parathyroid gland. These are also called chief cells, or they're also called parathyroid cells. So they're going to sense the drop in calcium, so they're the sensor in the negative feedback loop, and then they're also the control center because they're releasing parathyroid hormone, which will stimulate our effectors. So parathyroid hormone is abbreviated PTH. Parathyroid hormone then is going to stimulate our effectors. They're the same effectors as calcitonin, but they're working in the opposite way, which means calcitonin and parathyroid hormone are antagonistic hormones. So at bone, we will stimulate osteoclast activity. And so our osteoclast can break down bone and release that stored bone or that stored calcium into the blood. So we stimulate osteoclast activity and they begin to break down bone. At the small intestine, we'll stimulate absorption of calcium. So we increase calcium absorption. And then at the kidney, we'll stimulate increased calcium reabsorption. So if there was any calcium that was put into the fluid that's going to become urine, we can reabsorb it with parathyroid hormone on board. So again, a drop in calcium will be sensed by the principal cells in the parathyroid glands. They will respond by releasing parathyroid hormone. That makes them also the control center. Parathyroid hormone will stimulate our effectors, will increase osteoclast activity, begin breaking down bones so that we can release that stored calcium into the blood. Will increase calcium absorption in the small intestine, and will increase calcium reabsorption in the kidneys.